substance abuse counselor and mental health. I work at a recovery treatment facility where we serve both substance use disorder and mental health, and we're actually transitioning to expanding our mental health services so that we can take clients on that are only mental health, because right now substance use disorder is a priority, but we also offer mental health. But right now we offer 2 levels of care. 3.7 is detox slash withdrawal management, and stepping a little bit down to 3.5 is the SUD residential treatment. And so when new clients arrive, I have 24 hours to do the biopsychosocial assessment. And it's long because there are so many different components and so many different questions. So some clients get a little irritable, especially, so combining the fact that most of them are coming in and they're actively withdrawing from their substance, so they're not at their best. So some are feeling sick, some are feeling really fatigued. Like if they were a meth user, if they're coming down from meth, they're really tired, might be falling asleep with opioid use disorders. If they're coming down from it, I've had to do an assessment where a client was coming off of fentanyl and he was nodding off every few minutes to the point where he would be fully asleep, nodding off, and I would have to be like, hey, wake up. And so that definitely adds a challenging component to the biopsychosocial assessment. But so I'm already pretty familiar with it. So I was excited that this module covers information on it, because even though I'm familiar with it and I do them at my job, there were still things that I didn't know prior that I learned from this module. So 3 things that I didn't know prior. Number 1 was about genes and heritability. I definitely knew that there could be a genetic component to mental health. So I did know that in a very general sense, but I didn't know any specific numbers or anything like that. So I found this to be really interesting, where it was saying that, like for instance, for major depression, the heritability, it says ranges from 31% to 42% so that's the percentage of inheriting major depression as an inherited gene. And they didn't do numbers. The book didn't include specific numbers on anxiety, but it said that it's quite similar to the depression, and that it has moderate heritability with anxiety. So I didn't know that specifically, and I thought that was very interesting. And then it said, which I didn't officially know, but after reading it, I was like, okay, that definitely makes a lot of sense. It was saying that other disorders such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia may be more heritable. And I didn't officially know that, but that makes a lot of sense. Before my current job of working at a recovery treatment facility for substance use disorders, my last job was working at an all-men's homeless shelter. And that was my first job being really exposed to a lot of clients with schizophrenia. And what I found to be interesting, which aligns with this information, was that the clients who had the diagnosis of schizophrenia or like schizoaffective disorder, a lot of them said that like their mother or father like had schizophrenia. But what was interesting is if they had a relative, I think oftentimes it was the mother, they would say, that had schizophrenia as well. So that makes sense to me that it would have a higher heritability disorders like schizophrenia, but I didn't officially know that. So that was one thing I did not know. The second thing was actually, it was on coping skills, coping strategies, and I thought I knew a lot about coping strategies because it's a big part of what we do at the treatment facility. We try to teach as many coping skills, coping techniques as possible. I tell clients, I'm like, we're throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I was like, it's my job to teach a bunch of different ones, but it's your guys' job to find which ones work for you. And I was like, that can be the tricky part. Like, I don't know necessarily what's going to work best for you. Like what might work really well for one person might not work at all for another person. But something I didn't know about coping skills is that some coping skills are actually detrimental to certain disorders. I did not know that. And actually, knowing that is going to change my practice because I didn't realize, I guess I thought all coping techniques were made equal in terms of were for all different mental health disorders. So this is a game changer for me, knowing that some coping techniques not only are not helpful, but can actually make a disorder worse or bring on the disorder. So it was saying that the coping technique of avoidance coping, they said that avoiding situations that trigger anxiety can actually bring on anxiety disorders, because those people then are not taught the distress tolerance skills of they don't know how to tolerate like high stress or situations with anxiety. So I thought that was really interesting. So I did not know that beforehand, and now that I do, it's going to change the way I practice, the way I teach coping skills. So I'm really thankful for that. A third thing that I didn't know was that it was another thing where I didn't officially know, but after seeing it, I was like, okay, that makes sense, is larger family size is a risk factor for mental health disorders. And they were saying it's because like the resources are more like spread thin. So that's something I didn't know prior. And then it says that those with divorced parents are at a higher risk for mental health disorders, especially anxiety, behavior, and substance use disorders. So that makes sense. But it was my thing about, I'm not necessarily confused, but I would like to have more information on this, because I thought that if you have a situation where where it's very toxic, like let's say the parents are constantly fighting, it's actually more toxic for the home to have them together. I thought that it would be a better situation for them to split and be divorced than stay together and have like a toxic environment. But it's now saying that divorced parents, it's a risk factor for mental health disorders. So maybe I am a little bit confused. I'd like more information. So is it saying like, is it better if the parents stay together and not get a divorce? And does that then lower the risk factor of mental health? So that's something I'd like to know. And then two things I knew before were, I knew about, like if, to ask about like perinatal and, what was I gonna say? Perinatal and premature delivery. That's actually one of the first questions in our biopsychosocial assessments of did you have an abnormal delivery, were you premature? So I did know that knowing that is important because it's a risk factor if they were born premature. risk factor for a mental health disorder. So that's something I already knew. And then I knew about how trauma and loss are both risk factors for mental health disorders. We ask a lot of questions about trauma and loss. So I did know that definitely contributes and makes the risk higher for mental health disorders. Thank you.